everyone. Welcome. It is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023, and this is a regular session of the Bloomington Common Council. Madam Clerk, I invite you to call the roll. This is not a regular session? I just saw you.
We didn't have the roll call sheet up yet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we'll just do it like this. So, Councilmember Sandberg. Here. Here. Scambaluri.
Here.
Rollo.
Here.
Sims. Here. Smith.
Here.
Volin is not present. Rosenbarger is absent. And Flaherty.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll begin with our land and labor acknowledgement. We recognize that the City of Bloomington sits on native land. The city, as well as city administrative buildings, are on the traditional homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people, and we acknowledge that they are past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We also acknowledge that much of the economic progress and development in Indiana, and specifically Bloomington, resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color, specifically enslaved African labor. We acknowledge that this land remains home to and a site of gathering and healing for many indigenous and other people of color, and commit to the work necessary to create and promote a more equitable and just Bloomington. We move forward knowing and acknowledging our rich, complicated, and sometimes painful past so that we can learn from it and create a true land of opportunity. We'll move now into agenda summation. First, we have multiple sets of minutes to approve. We'll then move into a time of reports, including council member reports. We have 2 reports then from the mayor and city offices, including location changes for the Utilities Department and the Department of Public Works, and a second report on the scooter parking and enforcement pilot program. We'll then entertain any reports from council committees, and then move into our first of 2 periods of public comment. We'll then take up appointments to boards and commissions. We have no legislation for second readings and resolutions, and nor do we have any legislation for first readings this evening. We'll then move into our second period of public comment for the evening, and then we'll take up matters of council scheduling before we adjourn. So with that, we'll move into the approval of minutes. I would note that the September 16th set of minutes was included on this list in error. It has actually already been approved, and it was included on this list of minutes to approve this evening in error. So that's why you won't hear that date with this motion. So, Councilmember Rollo?
Madam President, I move the approval of the following minutes. September 16th, 2020.
No, not September 16th.
I'm sorry, April 14th, 2020 special session. May 19th.
2021.
I'm very sorry. Let me begin again. I move the approval of the following minutes. April 14th, 2021 special session. May 19th, 2021 regular session. August 4th, 2021 special session. August 11th, 2021 special session. August 31st, 2021 special session. September 15th, 2021 special session. And September 22nd, 2021 special session.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Scambaluri.
Yes.
Rollo.
Yes.
Smith.
Smith?
Yes.
You know what? I apologize. I skipped Councilmember Sims.
Apology accepted. Yes.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Sandberg.
Wow.
Yes.
Y'all, I apologize tonight. I'm just having a rough night.
We're all a little off balance tonight, so we'll catch up. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, let's move into a period of reports, starting with council member reports. I'll start on my far left. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, as liaison to the Plan Commission, I want to briefly report what happened. We had a Plat Commission meeting that was, I'm the alternate, and so there was one petition, and that was approved to convert a 2-lot area into called a two-lot subdivision, approved 9-0 by the Plat Committee. And then the Plan Commission, what it was a lot of UDO amendments for changes in the UDO. Most of them were technical amendments. Some of them were related to language changes, some federal changes. So they were related to Chapter 4, Chapter 5, and Chapter 6. Most of them are just not substantive, but Chapter 4 related to landscape, plastic netting, a waiver of second hearings, designating that for the staff to be able to make those decisions. I think the one that's probably the most substantive is on page 231, the discussion of the plan commissioners was that the parking maximum on commercial properties and perhaps municipal properties, there was a movement to take the parking maximums out. So there was some really great discussion on that. The commissioners weren't really sure what that was about and how that related to developments. Does it have a deleterious effect on developments? And does it have a deleterious effect on building more affordable housing? So there was a lot of questions that it was a really good discussion, and a member of the public also pointed out that evidently the city building will have a 4 spots per 1,000 square feet parking standard when everything else is going to have 2 spots per 1,000 square feet. So, so there was some really great discussion on that, and so what ended up happening was we took that out, amended it, we took that out of the changes to the UDO, sent everything else forward so that the council will hear that, but the parking maximums will be considered under discussion still. Chapter 5 and 6, again, had pretty much some technical corrections and some procedural changes to comply with some federal issues. So to be mindful of our time tonight, if council members have extended questions regarding the proceedings, please just send me an email, talk to me, and I'll try to answer your questions. Additionally, after the meeting, after this report and all, I will send the tables of all the changes to all of us, and then it will be explicitly in the information and should answer most of the questions for the changes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Volin, a report this evening?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Sims?
Thank you. My report is going to be pretty much straightforward. Just want to remind our community that we are fast approaching another voting opportunity, which will commence in our May primary. Voting is a major tenet of our democracy, and I think work has to be done in order to make informed decisions on who we elect. Now, there will be, or we do have several contested races, and I think at last count, when I look at my calendar, we have 6 or 7 or 8 public debates and candidate forums that are coming up. And I would strongly suggest that we educate ourselves in order to decide whom we should elect. I won't get into it much further, but I think this is very, very important. Many of you see us up here every week. You know where we've been. I'm kind of interested in knowing where we're going to go. and a lot of that will be based on who we put in offices. So just a friendly reminder, and hopefully we'll do that a time or two again before the primary. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
No report, thanks.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, just to remind everybody that my monthly constituent meeting is coming up this Saturday. It's always the second Saturday of the month at 11 a.m., and it will be on Zoom. The link can be found on the City Council website. So bloomington.in.gov/council. So hope to see many of you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. On Saturday night, I had the opportunity to attend the world premiere of the opera Anne Frank, produced by the Jacobs School of Music, and in the beautiful and majestic Musical Arts Center. I always enjoy being in that beautiful venue. The musical, the opera itself was, of course, very ambitious and far-reaching, and kudos always to the School of Music for their excellence in all of their opera productions. What was different for me in attending this particular opera was that for the first time ever in my experience, the people attending the opera were wanded. There were security guards. Our purses that we brought in were searched. And this, again, was something I had never encountered in attending an arts performance here at the university. And I'm not sure if that was out of an abundance of caution, given the subject matter of the opera, or if it was due to some actual threat that had been perceived by the venue. But in any case, it made me reflect on not only the opera itself and the important lessons that it shares with us about anti-Semitism, about hatred, about the Holocaust. It makes me reflect on the times that we live in which we are faced with this kind of caution in violent and turbulent times. And it was heartbreaking, I mean, on many levels. I mean, the story of Anne Frank, of course, is one of tragedy. But the very fact that we now have to have such increased security with respect to the hatred that is all around us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. Just a quick note that as of last month and continuing into this month, my constituent meetings have changed from the third Monday to the fourth Monday of the month. And since we will not be meeting the next 2 weeks, there will be another occasion to remind folks about that. So that will be Monday, March 27th at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. You can access details for that at bloomington.in.gov/council. There's a sidebar calendar and also a link to a calendar for the council. So just wanted to remind constituents of that. Thank you.
We'll now move into reports from the mayor and city offices, and I believe we have Mr. Wason and Mr. Kelson with us this evening to talk about location changes for the Utilities Department and the Department of Public Works. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good evening, Vic Kelson, Utilities Director. I'm here to give a brief presentation. Adam will be joining in as well regarding our proposal to redevelop the Winston Thomas site on the south side of Bloomington as a new city facility. Winston Thomas is down at Gordon Pike and just a little bit west of Walnut Street near the Kroger down there. Currently, the map shows where City Hall is. Currently, the Utilities building is at the Utility Service Center building is at the is on Miller Drive near South High School. And what we're talking about, that site also has a lot of public works operations. Adam will speak to that later. We're proposing to build a new campus for the Utilities Department at Winston Thomas. The history of that site is interesting. This was a wastewater treatment plant that was built in 1934. It served the city until the early 1980s when PCBs were found to be in plentiful abundance on the property. So we went through a number of years, discussions about incinerators and so forth during the cleanup phase. The site was on the national priorities list under the Superfund law for quite a long while, but it has now been really removed a number of years ago from the national priorities list, and it's available for redevelopment by the city. This is a map of the site. The pink outline is the rough boundary of the property. The PCB-laden material has been encapsulated in a berm about halfway between the north and south ends of the property. Over the last couple of decades, the city has built training facilities and storage facilities for the police department and fire department, and CBU has sited a bulk water station on the property as well. There are a few buildings left on the property. One of them is probably reusable as, in some manner, that is the superintendent's home, which is pictured here. So why would we be wanting to find a new facility? The map you're looking at here shows the layout of the Miller Drive property. As you can see, the facility is completely full. CBU's facilities are completely full of vehicles. All our heavy equipment sits out in the rain out there, except for things like vacuum trucks that have water in them, so you have to store them indoors in the wintertime, which of course means that our garage, which is also undersized, is always crammed with vehicles at night. We also have only an outdoor storage yard with a small barn on it. So we have, if you drive down by the Winston Thomas property, you'll see a lot of things like corrugated culvert pipes and things like that sitting out there in the sunshine, uncovered in the grass, because we don't have any place else to store them. So the idea is to put a utilities campus on the southern portion of the property. We would put a service center, a new garage, and a covered yard to protect our equipment. We've done a master plan study, and the master plan, the green building would be the service center, which would be easily accessed from Gordon Pike. We'd recite the state certified lab from the Dillman plant to put it on the same property, and then we'll have a garage and a covered yard and plenty of room for future expansion over the next 30, 40, 50 years as we need it. I'll let Adam take over for Public Works.
Excuse me. Good evening, folks. Adam Wason, Public Works Director. Always a pleasure and an honor to be in front of you. So as long as been the case with the Department of Public Works, we're more than happy to accept some hand-me-downs. If anyone knows about some of the history of our facilities, that's where we've been throughout the course of the last 30 years. This map just kind of shows you, for Public Works, we've got the administrative offices and our facilities team here at City Hall. We've co-located all of our parking services to the 4th Street parking garage there off of Walnut Street. The street and fleet divisions, as Vic was shown on the previous map, are sited at the Miller Drive and Henderson location. And then we have a sanitation garage down on South Walnut Street, right near where we made major investments in the animal care and control division. We're spread out. We're across the city from the southern ends to City Hall and a few locations in between. When I talk about those hand-me-downs, so the street division of Public Works up on the top of the hill here where it says DPW Street Division Building. That's an old Parks and Rec facility that they used to have for their operations. I think we figured out in the late 80s is when that was, it was transferred to the street department when the Adams Street Operations Center for Parks was built. The fleet maintenance garage towards the northern part of this off of Miller Drive. That was transferred, I think, in the early 80s from Bloomington Transit to the city for fleet services. So another hand-me-down facility that we've made the most of. You can see here the street division storage and equipment under the gray, and then the salt storage. Those are facilities that we're currently using for our operations. Just like Vic, we've got a lot of trucks and heavy equipment that aren't undercover, that aren't protected from the elements. But we make do. We've long made do, and we're proud of the efforts that we've had. It's been a vision of mine for some time since I've been with Public Works to have a centralized location where our staff could all reside. If this is to move forward, and hopefully does, we envision that the CBU administration building would then become home to all Public Works operations outside of the animal care and control facility. The idea of when I think about all of the efficiencies and the positives that could come from co-locating Public Works staff, it's just really tremendous. We would certainly be utilizing the CBU administration building, but then we'd have the opportunity to also re-envision a lot of the other space up there for how we could best use it. Basically, just to kind of wrap up my comments here, we're excited about a future where we could co-locate. We're excited about a future where we could gain those efficiencies. We know there are a lot of steps to take to get there, but this is really exciting for us in Public Works. I know Vic may have a few more comments on what's next, but we look forward to a day when Public Works is co-located. So thank you.
And just a quick summary of what's next. What's happened so far is we've completed the master plan and we've updated it to take into account the realities of how the markets and the construction business have changed over the last few years. The study was done 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, pre-pandemic. So we've updated all of that. Before we could proceed on a project like this, we would need to do bonding in the waterworks. Bonding in the waterworks requires approval by the Utility Service Board, the council, and then the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. So with facing those hurdles all in turn, before we would really embark on the final design and construction plan for the property, we would want to make sure that we were going to be able to bond for it. So we're bringing that resolution to the Utility Service Board on March 27th, and we're on the calendar for council on April 12th. So we will be bringing that forward. That really is pretty much the first big step in the process. At that point, we could begin the actual construction design and try to get moving with construction as soon as we possibly can. As Adam said, we're excited about the prospect as well of having the ability to properly store our equipment and properly store the materials that we use to serve the public and provide water, sewer, and stormwater services. And thank you so much for having us tonight, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councilmember Sims and Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you, Mr. Kelson and Mr. Wason, for your report. First of all, with regard to the PCBs that are encapsulated, do we test that area? How often do we do that to ensure that there's no leaching? And when was the last time was testing
We
done?
don't regularly test it. The places that are tested are all associated with the Westinghouse properties, but during my time at CBU, we haven't had occasion to go out and do testing at the facility.
Okay, so how do we know it's fully encapsulated? Do we just assume that?
I can look into that.
I'm just asking.
I can look into it further.
Okay.
The whole project was done under the auspices of
Right.
the EPA, so it has been thoroughly investigated. But I will confirm whether we do testing or not.
Okay, thank you. And since EPA done it, means it would never, ever leak, no problems for the rest of history. I'm just asking for testing so that we're sure. Okay, thank you. On what's next, the bond issuance, and obviously there's revenue in order to pay for the bond and plus our ongoing infrastructure. So how do we anticipate when we're looking at future revenue? Is this going to require more rate increases?
In the short
I
term.
mean, I know we've got some scheduled, but
Right. We're planning to be bringing a water rate case in 2024, which would not go into effect certainly until 2025. So in the first 2 years of such a project, we would be paying for any debt service out of our current rates. which we would do that by reducing the annual expenditures for water main replacement by some amount to cover the bonds for the first 2 years, and then thereafter we would it would be included in the rates going forward. This is part of why you have to go to IURC first, because they'll know that it's coming if the debt is pre-approved by the IURC, then they'll know it's coming and they won't question it in the next rate case.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure our customers know it's coming.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wason, I do have a question for you.
Thanks.
Now, once Department of Public Works have consolidated everything, obviously there will be spaces that have been vacated, and I'm assuming. So have there been discussions, or what do we plan to do with those
So-
properties that have been or will be vacated?
Yeah, so when we talk about the co-location of Public Works, there's a lot to be determined yet. This is a very initial, we have not embarked in our master planning. This is just kind of within our conversations with the administration and others in terms of how we would foresee something like this. Their building's not very old, so it's a great facility for us to possibly be able to move into, but like the street department right now, can we go back to the presentation by chance? When you look at the street department, the street division's building that they're in, that's the old Parks, it's a pole barn. It's a cinder block pole barn, and so, it doesn't have a lot of useful life left in it. We need to make investments in it currently just to keep it functional and up to occupied standards. So, that building there is really old, and we've got the information on exactly when they were built and such. But so vacating is going to need to happen at some point. Whether or not we move forward with this plan, we'll have to figure out something for something like that, for the age of a building like that. The fleet maintenance garage, we don't necessarily, this would all be part of the master planning and site planning, but we would probably make investments into that garage and then have supplemental space for fleet maintenance services in the current CBU administrative building in their garage area. But we would imagine that we would continue to operate some of the fleet services, the actual services in that garage, whereas the administrative function may move to the centralized administrative facility. Outside of that, the sanitation garage on the south side of the city at Walnut Street and just north of Gordon Pike, it's again a large pole barn. It stores the trucks. It's got 2 small offices and a bathroom. I think it was built in the early 80s as well. So, that would be a site that would probably become available for other uses. But between street and fleet, those are either going to be reutilized or at the end of useful life. When it comes to, right now for City Hall, we have a small administrative team that operates just right across the hall from here, about 5 staff members in the front desk as well. We would hope to relocate that. We'd always have a presence here in City Hall, being that it's one of our largest publicly accessible facilities through our facilities division. But yeah, it would basically be the sanitation garage and the fleet services building and how we would reutilize those. I don't foresee that the street building would be anything but demolished.
Okay. Any of those properties that you have, what's the largest one? Do you have any that are, I don't think so, but it's like 4 acres, 5 acres, any of those?
We can pull that, we can provide that information back to the council, for sure. I don't have it off the top of my head, though.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Rallo, then Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Could either of you tell us what the cost is, estimated cost of this campus?
The estimated cost is around $38 million. That includes demolition and cleanup of the current site and just restoring it to a pre-construction state, because there's a lot of old stuff sitting around over there. Large trickling filter basin that has to be refilled and a lot of other things. But we're planning to proceed with that work this year, regardless of whether we build a new facility in the near future or not, simply because it needs to be done. That site's just another place that's been left to decay and needs to be made
So the total
appropriate
cost is 38.
Yes.
And the cost of demolition and preparing the site is how much?
2 or 3, somewhere in there.
And besides these revenue bonds that you're proposing, are there other funds that you're intending to use?
Well, certainly we'll be trying to see if there's grant monies available. We anticipate that there will be a cost involved in the transfer of the current CBU facilities at Miller Drive to Public Works. So there will certainly be a transfer there that will offset part of the cost to the utility ratepayers. And we'll seek low-income financing or low interest rate financing and grants opportunities as we can find them.
Let me ask one more. In the Miller Drive facility, is that to be, you're going to abandon that, or this is an expansion?
No, we would abandon that. Everything, all of CBU would relocate to Winston-Thomas.
And then what would happen to the Miller? That was just...
Public Works would move in, as Adam said.
Public Works moves there.
Yes.
I see, okay. I thought it was, Public Works is going to occupy with you at Winston-Thomas. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes, I think this question is for Mr. Wason.
Happily.
What resources do you or the administration foresee to pay for the move of Public Works to Miller Drive?
Well, as Vic just said, there would obviously have to be an agreement in the transfer of the property to be a public works facility. Initially, costs that we would look to incur are some of the master planning of the site, but really, outside of additional storage facilities for the equipment that's currently outdoors, we would look to utilize what's there in terms of CBU's service center, their garages, some of the awnings. Part of that obviously gets determined in a master planning process for us is on that site, but the utility service center building right now, their parking lots, that would be an upgrade beyond belief for someone like me right now in terms of being able to take over a facility like that. It's, for those that haven't been in there, it's a modern office facility. It's got conference rooms. It's got a utilities service board room where the Board of Public Works could meet. Just when I think of all the things Public Works does, it could be a really great fit and, like I said, a really nice hand-me-down.
But it will cost money to
Sure.
move there.
Yes.
So is that something that is just projected to be put in the Public Works budget in coming years, or is there any bonding or other revenue sources to
Some of that
pay for
gets
that?
determined long-term through the master planning of the site, what they would actually suggest for, what happens to the street department building. Do we not, street division building, is that demolished and not reused? Like I said, I imagine we would fully continue to use the fleet maintenance garage for a lot of the activities that occur there, but we're hoping to keep those costs to a minimal other than, the storage facilities for equipment and then reutilize what's on site. But yes, it would obviously be coming before the council, whether if it required bond funding or budget approval through the normal budget process. And again, as Vic mentioned, right now is a key time to be monitoring what grants and federal, what other dollars are out there. We just had a great conversation with several staff and outside an outside firm today on how we can better position ourselves for larger grant funding opportunities, and this is certainly one of those that's on the radar for that as well.
Sorry to keep harping on this, but the transfer of assets from CBU to the city, which is technically separate. So does that mean the city will have to pay for that facility in some way?
Possible there would be, yeah, there would be, yes, that would have to be negotiated amongst the utility service board, and the two administration, the city administration, the utility service board, who owned the land originally. There's a lot to be determined there. Every few years, we're entering into interlocal agreements with CBU for different things, whether services, and I could see this being part of that conversation as well.
So we don't have any idea how much that would cost the city?
That would be negotiated amongst those parties.
Okay. Thank you.
We are
Oh.
presently.
Mr.
The
Kelson.
Controller's Office is presently in the process of having the current CBU facilities at Miller Drive appraised as a starting place for those discussions. But it could take any number of forms. It could be a lump payment. It could be a leasing arrangement. It could be any number of things. We're not far enough along to know that yet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I would note that we are at our 20 minutes for the report section. We haven't even gotten to the second report yet. So with the council's permission, may we extend this time since reports are the focus of what we're doing this evening? Okay, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Volan.
First question is kind of facetious, but is the new place where you're moving to within the city limits?
It is.
All of it is? All the land is?
Yes, all of it.
Because I was going to wonder if you were going to submit to voluntary annexation.
We don't have to, fortunately.
I mean, you'd have a sewer waiver already, I assume.
We
but-
would, though, yes.
Right. There are a couple of water tanks in the current location. Are those going to be relocated? I mean, they're CBU water tanks. What are they for, and what are you going to do with them?
Those are actually the tanks that the original 36-inch main from the Monroe plant empties into. They need to be located where they are because they're up on top of a hill.
Oh, yeah.
They're ground storage tanks, so in order to maintain pressure in our distribution system, they need to stay there.
Well, I mean, I can see how you could twist Public Works' arm to cooperate and leave them there.
We'll accommodate.
Yeah, I figured.
We also have a booster station there right next to the fire station.
When you talk about the garages, you're not talking about parking for employees, you're talking about storage and maintenance of heavy vehicles, right?
Exactly.
In
yes.
all the cases, both the garages, Public Works, and utilities?
Yes, absolutely.
And finally, with respect to the transfer of ownership, so in other words, right now, this current CBU property is owned by this sort of separate entity by ratepayers,
That's right. It is in the hands of the Utility Service Board, I believe.
as opposed to the taxpayers who would own it when it becomes all Public Works.
That's true, yes.
So is there, I guess I don't know how to ask the question, like, is there any reason why you don't just sell it for $1 to, since it's all the city, or because there's that difference is significant?
I think the difference would be significant. I think certainly that's still got whatever.
You're being upstaged, is all I'm saying.
Well, I knew he'd like the idea. That's going to be up to the Utility Service Board and the administration and the councils.
But just to be clear, that it's not the same pocket. It's not just a simple transfer between departments.
That's right. The service center was built with ratepayer dollars from people who were paying their water bills. It was not paid for with tax money. It wasn't paid with property taxes or income taxes. It was paid entirely by ratepayer dollars.
So I have one more question about that, but I think Mr. Wason had something. Okay. So I didn't quite get what you feel needs to be built administratively at Winston-Thomas. Do you need to build office facilities there? And if so, how much? How much square footage approximately?
The office facilities will be somewhat larger than the present office facilities. It won't be a huge increase, but they will be somewhat larger. The laboratory will be something we don't currently have at the service center. It would be much better to have it there. We are bursting at the seams at all three plants and their laboratories. So to the extent that we can centralize some of those activities, we can make our other facilities more functional by doing that. And then, of course, the garage will be substantially larger because we've just got so many vehicles that we can't park indoors.
I mean, with respect to the administrative facility, can you build the building so that it's something that can be easily added onto, maybe even upwards if it's that limited space-wise?
Certainly. In fact, the master plan document calls for it to have rather a smaller footprint than the current building, but it would be on 2 stories.
Okay, good. But I mean, and you could theoretically build higher if you needed to.
There's plenty of space there to extend it either upward or outward.
It's good to hear. Thank you both.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilmember Rollo.
I wondered if the expansion that you're proposing here is related to service expansion, anticipating annexation.
No, we're bursting at the seams now, but clearly, as the city grows, and it will continue to grow, we will need annexation or otherwise. We're going to continue to to need to serve more customers. And so we do need to plan for that future. Right now, we are very limited in our current facility. We really don't have good storage space. We have, for example, we have all of our paper records that have to be maintained. They're in the building at 423 South Washington Street. That location could be used for a lot of much more preferable activities than simply a warehouse full of papers at this point in time. So, we need more storage for equipment other than the trucks and the other vehicles, but also we can make better use of some of the space that we have in other locations. So the 423 South Washington location could be used for any number of things. It's right, for those who don't know where that is, it's right next to Two Sticks Bakery.
Okay, well, so you got a lot of paper to store. We just purchased the entire back half of the showers, and I'm wondering, at a great expense, and I'm wondering about whether we can simply make do with the existing space that the city has acquired. What would you say in response to that, either of you or both?
Well, for utilities perspective, we want our things to be in the same place as much as anybody else does. There was a time, the building that we're in right now was built in the early 2000s after the prior building that was about the same size caught fire in 2003. For a number of years, CBU operations were divided between the Showers property and the what was still functional of the old building at Miller Drive, and it was very disruptive and inefficient to operate that way. The fact is that a majority of the things that we need to park somewhere are going to be things like great big trucks, piles of pipe, valves, all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to need all of that stuff needs a home. And right now, its home is sitting out in the weather, which is just not sustainable to operate that way. So, moving a few of our offices up here would be really impractical and disruptive of our operations.
Mr. Wazen, would you like to add on to this?
Sure. As I mentioned, part of this for us is about centralized operations. We are unlike most of our peer communities in terms of being spread out to multiple locations, having staff at several different facilities. As far as the purchase of the western portion of Showers here, obviously there's a very large public safety focus with that. Would we be able to centralize our public works operations with the other plans in place for that? No, that wouldn't be practical for us, given the other plans for that building. This for us is, we in our conversations, it's a realization of the needs. This comes together as a good opportunity for both departments. And that's where our discussions have always come from. A lot of what we've tried to do in Public Works is modernize, and I think if you would visit some of our facilities, you'd recognize they're anything but modern. And so this is really a great opportunity for us in that regard.
Thank you for your answers.
Mm-hmm. Additional questions? Mr. Wason, Mr. Kelson, thank you for being with us tonight. So, Mr. Wason, you are still with us. And I believe we have Mr. Crowley with us as well.
No, it's just going to be me tonight, and I will start with the statement I was going to end with based on some previous conversations. But I'm here tonight to talk about our pilot project that we implemented beginning early last October on a pilot area of the downtown to document and collect data on scooter parking violations in an area that was from 3rd Street to 10th Street, Morton to Indiana. What I was mentioning that I would start with is that this presentation isn't going to touch on all the other topics that are scooters in Bloomington right now. Just to let you folks know, there is a large internal team working with many community partners, including Indiana University and the scooter companies, on some proposed changes that I believe are coming forward, will be coming forward to this body in 3 weeks or so. So the Economic Sustainable Development Department, Public Works, Planning and Transportation, Engineering, Legal, Mayor's Office have all been working together in conversation and coordination to determine what next steps we want to propose as far as renewing the agreements with the scooter companies. All the fruits of that labor will come to this body, like I said, in about 3 weeks. And so this is just a quick report to let you know what we documented since last October. What we committed to was just getting some folks on the streets, walking that large downtown area to document, collect data, and correct parking violations of the scooters. So since that time, since early October, we funded several positions, first through a temporary staffing agency for October through December, and then with some actual temporary part-time city staff. We funded that with the revenues that had been coming in through the scooter companies. At first, we had 2 to 3 of the temporary employees through the temp agency doing this work, and then in December, we hired 2 staff members as temporary part-time. Currently, we're down to 1 and trying to hire additional staff here for the spring. Overall, the average is about 25 hours per week of data collection and corrective actions. What we found was that we documented 605 total violations in that time period. So this was, you see a breakdown by company there on the left. These were violations that included, the vast majority of the violations we encountered and corrected were blocked sidewalks or ADA ramps. So exactly what we don't want to be occurring. So we found 479 instances where we moved scooters off of a sidewalk that was blocked or an ADA ramp. The second category, out of landscape beds or landscape areas, I think we could probably attribute to late night activities and some revelry, mostly in those instances where we would find the scooters in landscape areas. 22 regular parking space, or 22 parking spaces, 12 just blocking rights of way, 3 blocking alleys, blocked driveways, and then 3 instances where they were actually parked in ADA parking spaces. So that's the breakdown of the types of violations we were encountering and correcting as part of this effort. And not surprising, when you look at it, where we were finding the most of the violations, Kirkwood was number 1. But overall, these 4 kind of corridors made up about 53% of the total violations when they make up only about 25% of the actual square footage or blocks in the area that we were enforcing. So a few of the themes that I can talk about with the locations and the types of violations, especially with the violation types. These were not the companies that were deploying their fleets, leaving these scooters in these conditions in the vast, vast majority of instances. I would probably say that less than 5% of what we encountered was scooter companies, their employees or contractors setting up the scooters for deployment and use, and well over 90 to 95% of this was the actual user of the scooter leaving the scooter in an area that would be considered a violation. So again, this is just information on the pilot project of what we committed to collecting data on, what we committed to correcting in the short period of time. Again, we're working with a lot of community partners on some updates that will come to you folks here in the next several weeks, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. I know I have several questions, and I'm guessing my colleagues do too. Sure. So Councilmember Sims, then Rollo.
You mentioned corrective actions. What does that mean?
So if the staff member encountered a scooter blocking a sidewalk, they would take a picture, get the serial number, document it in the T2 parking system that we use, and then move the scooter to an area that's no longer blocking a sidewalk or making something inaccessible. So sometimes that's a few feet, sometimes it's, several, 15, 20 feet to get it into an area that's leaving a sidewalk or ramp accessible.
So the correction action is that we move the scooter. It has nothing to do with the suppliers of these scooters.
Not as part of this
I'm not
pilot
so sure
program.
corrective action is the right term, is what I'm saying.
would
Corrective
say it
action tends to have consequences in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong here. And this, I'm not arguing with you, but this is kind of a problem. And 479 instances on sidewalk and ADA ramps. Is there a goal? I mean, is there such a thing? What is the number that is the scooter companies or we as administration think would be acceptable? 27?
No, I wouldn't put a number to any of this, Councilmember Sims. What I would say is that ideally 0, but what we committed to in the fall was to collect this data and try to figure out what's happening, where it's happening, how it's happening, and to take action to correct what's going on. So, I mean, we could, whether or not corrective action is the right word, what we wanted to do was get the sidewalks accessible again. And like I mentioned earlier, we used the fees that we'd been collecting as part of the scooter program over the years to pay these employees to do that. I can tell you when we first were discussing the scooters coming to Bloomington and such, we thought about contracting with a firm to do exactly what we were doing then. And we thought this was a good pilot program to collect the data, understand what's happening, and to correct what were blocked sidewalks or ramps or parking spaces.
Why wouldn't Bird and Lime and those other companies, why wouldn't they contract somebody to do what it is we're doing?
That's a possibility, too.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rollo.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at this. Couple of questions. One is the revenue, the fees that accrue from the companies. Are these employees that have been employed to monitor and to correct these violations? Have they been? Is this compensation? Is it adequate compensation? Does it pay for their?
I guess I'm not following your line of questioning here.
My understanding is that we get $10,000 a year or something from the scooter companies plus 15 cents per ride or whatever.
Sure.
Are we having to expend taxpayer money in order to essentially do whatever monitoring or enforcement that has been occurring?
No, I think what I'm trying to get across there is that the revenues we brought in are paying for the staff that were doing these duties.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Okay. Why aren't we impounding them?
That is, we can have that discussion in a few weeks. If we want to change and go that direction, we can. But that's part of the larger discussion that we're hoping to have in a few weeks.
And my last question for the moment is, so they're operating under an expired contract. Why? Why are we allowing them to operate under an expired contract?
I would point that that's not something I've decided. That's been a decision of the entire administration to continue allowing them to operate while we figure out what the next steps are, and that's what would be coming in the next several weeks.
Does this in any way open us to liability?
I don't see a member of the legal team here. I would not answer that myself.
Well, okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional round 1 questions. Councilmember Sandberg.
Recently had a meeting with IU personnel, and one of the recommendations that I understand that they made, talking to IU personnel, some of the recommendations they made regarding scooters, particularly since their concern over the scooter death that occurred on the IU campus, is to restrict even more further than we have the operating hours from maybe dusk to dawn. Is that something that's going to be coming forward in the next couple of weeks, tightening up the number of hours in which these scooters will be legally allowed to operate?
I would defer to what's going to come forward in the council legislative packet at that time, but yes, I would expect that there are some hours of operation changes that are requested.
And of course, IU has been impounding some of the scooters that they find in violation of their, impeding their student population and their ADA compliance. So if we were to institute impounding of these scooters that are in violation, where would that be? What possible location could we impound them and then extract more from the scooter companies for the violations that, frankly, I think are their responsibility and not ours?
What I'd say is, I tried to really proceed my comments here with this is about the pilot project we had in place. So tonight's report was to talk about what we found, what data we collected. I'm not here really to speak about what we're going to be doing here in the future. What I can say is there's been a large group of both city staff and IU staff and community, the scooter companies, all having discussions on what the future of scooters in Bloomington looks like.
Thank you.
Councilmember Volin.
Go back to the first slide, the one that showed the violations by company. There we go. So I think what's missing from this graph, and which I think we are going to need when we have the longer conversation, is how many scooters per company are currently authorized?
Trying to find out exactly what those numbers are, working with Hank Duncan, our new bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, who's also working with Jeff Jackson and many others in the team. But yes, I realize that'll be relevant to our
Can you
future
give us a rough idea? Are they equal?
According to Hank this morning, and I can't give exact numbers here, but we think his understanding was that Lime had the largest deployment, which is interesting based on
Deployment.
yes.
Okay.
Bird was the second highest number deployment, and then VO was the third in terms of total numbers that Hank was looking at this morning. Realize that's very relevant, and we're working to provide a lot more information in that regard as we move forward. If Lime had the largest deployment and the fewest number of violations, why?
That's the standard we want them all to live up to.
Exactly.
Right.
So what's the nuance there that Lime is doing to message to their user to make sure that the violations aren't occurring?
I hope it wouldn't be nuanced in our response. I hope he would say, unless you meet this standard, you're not going to be authorized to have scooters here anymore. I mean, that should be that simple.
That's very fair in terms of how we want to move forward.
So yeah, I think the relevant statistic is going to be that figure divided by the number of vehicles deployed, or even better would be the number of rides taken by each vehicle, because I think it's the number of rides they took, which each company should have record of.
Yeah.
Because Lime scooters may be used less often because they have so many out there. We don't really know how many they're being used, and I would think that would be the more relevant statistic. But I mean, judging from what you've just said alone right now, whatever Bird and VO are doing are probably the problem.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to assume that Lime isn't a problem either. We don't really. Do you have any statistics prior to, like, what period of time does this represent?
This is October, the beginning of October.
Two
through current.
quarters.
Through current, yes.
Well, actually, it's not even 2 quarters, so it's not out of.
About 5 months, 4.5.
Okay. Do you have any prior data?
No, this was the pilot program. This was our effort to try to start collecting that data. Prior to that, we asked parking enforcement staff to move it. We asked city staff on the streets if they saw something that was, so no, we didn't have the hard data. That's why we really wanted to do what we did with this, to understand what are we seeing in this area, how can we then look to make changes to how we enter into agreements with the companies.
Okay, well, the other question I would ask then is, because this is a pilot project, it's important to note how much effort we put into the enforcement. So would you say that this was the best they could do, but there were a lot more violations, or would you say that they got most of the violations?
Based on the number of hours worked, the fact that they were temporary employees that had higher rates of turnover than we would expect. For the first couple months, it was through a temp agency, so it wasn't always a consistent set of employees. So no, there were more violations in this geographic area throughout this time period that we did not correct or find, or based on the number of hours worked and the staff that was out there. Given the number of hours they worked and such, I think they were doing a noble effort. It was all by foot. It was all, So we know it needs to get better. We know we need to bring something forward to the council. I hope, I want to just make a statement here that any of my answers here tonight aren't to be dismissive. It's that we're still working on a final product that's going to come to the council. Could it have been double the number of violations that we didn't find? Quite possibly.
Well, the last thing I would ask is that, there's a key word on this slide, and the word is parking. This is the kind of thing that the Parking Commission thinks about as well. And I think that you might want to work with the Parking Commission on tracking and reporting that data. In other words, this is the kind of data that we would include in our annual reports. It's vehicle parking, it's just not in that was my last question, actually, was what is the rule again that we have about scooters not being allowed to park in car parking spots on the street? Is that really the case?
Councilmember, I'd have to go review the ordinance again, but I believe the language is something to the extent of in bike parking space. I think it precludes parking in traditionally automobile spaces, but then that bike racks are available in other, other on-street parking spaces. But we can follow up on that in our discussions.
I just feel like a scooter, which is a motorized vehicle parking in a space reserved for motorized vehicles, it's, I'm not sure that should be quite as strenuously punished as scooter parking
What if it's a
across the
metered
sidewalk.
spot?
What's that?
And then if it's a metered spot?
Well, as long as they're paying the meter, they should be able to pay the meter. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Additional round one questions. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I think I probably asked this before, Mr. Wason, but so each year, if we're having a program to monitor and help the violations, do you have an estimate on how much would that cost us?
If it all depends. If we were hiring 2 full-times or 4 we can.
What do you think is great?
Well, I can tell you when we initially had these conversations 3 years ago with a company out of California that does this for cities, they were talking $150,000+ a year at that time. I can't imagine that's not but doubled at this point in time in terms of overall costs and all the factors. I think the biggest thing for us is to figure out the most strategic way to handle these things, and that's what we're trying to figure out. Right. Does it involve impoundment? Does it involve fines? All those things are certainly on the table, and I think this is just all, there's been growing pains here. This is an emerging technology market, and I think we've experienced the growing pains and why we did the pilot project. And could have more have been done? Yeah, probably. But are we doing what we thought was best at this time? Yeah, we're trying to.
Oh, yeah, and I appreciate you doing the pilot. I think that it helps out incredibly to collect this data. So where I was going was, if we guessed that doing the program would be $150,000, just the, spitballing, then would the future mean that we would ask for licensure costs that would equal our outcome, how much it cost us to do, and then so we would be trying to figure out, a number, including, I and licensure that would equal that. Is that part of what everybody's thinking?
I certainly think I think it would be, how would I answer this without, I don't think we would want to enter into any activities that it was general fund money or, if we're charging these companies to be able to operate here, we want those revenues to the city to cover the costs that we're experiencing, would be my take, and I would assume that's the take of the entire administration as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional round one? If not, I'll take a turn. Thank you for this presentation, Mr. Wason. In the current contract, which I understand is now we are out of contract, who has the right to terminate the contract and under what circumstances?
I believe it's the Board of Public Works or the council, but I can follow up with you on that for sure.
I'm sorry, say that.
I think it's, I don't recall if the termination occurs at the council level or the Board of Public Works level, and I can find that out.
And on what grounds?
I would have to defer to getting back to you on that one.
Okay. That's a question that preview will like, spoiler alert, will likely come back on the 29th.
Absolutely. We'll be ready for that one.
So, with the understanding that you don't have anything definite to present to council, that'll come in 3 weeks, with the understanding that you don't have anything definite for us tonight, I would ask, you've talked about some variables, whether or not to impound, whether or not to fine, performance expectation. What else is on that list? What else is being explored by the scooter group at IU, the scooter group here at the city that you've been participating in?
I, again, don't want to sound dismissive, but that's what's to come. They're talking about things like hours of operations, where they should be parked, how the fines should be handled. It's a large group of city staff with a lot of folks having input on it, not just Public Works. So, again, not to be dismissive, but that's what's to come.
A little bit dismissive. Okay. Round 2 questions. Councilmember Volan?
Maybe the point of Councilmember Scambaluri and other people's questions is, have there been any council members involved in those discussions?
I think we've got internal teams. We're happy to,
Well, I think that we're a little concerned about being given an ordinance and being asked to, approve it, let alone quickly, without our ability to consider it as well. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to be asked to decide it quickly because the contract has expired. Okay. Should we be worried about that? The contract itself will continue until one party leaves it, right?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional round 2 questions. Seeing none. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Wason. We
We'll see
appreciate
you in a
you
few
being
weeks.
with us.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay. That concludes our 2 reports from the mayor and city offices. Are there any reports from council committees? Seeing none, we'll move into our first of 2 periods of public comment. This is for items not currently on the agenda, this evening. Deputy Attorney Kulak, could you please extend our invitation on Zoom? And could we have a show of hands here in chambers? Go ahead.
For folks on Zoom who would like to make a comment, you'll need to raise your hand using the raise hand button. You can find that in the reactions tab, or if you're on a mobile device, you can find it on the more tab. If you're having issues, please send a message to the meeting host. Currently, we have 1 hand raised.
Thank you. Let's start here in chambers. If you would, please sign in. I always forget to remind people to do that. State your name for the record, and then you will have 5 minutes.
Good evening, council members. Paul Post, President of FOP Lodge 88. I'm here tonight to give you a brief update following the purchase of the Showers West building for the new police and fire headquarters project. There was a lot of talk about transparency and collaboration in that discussion, so we think it's only fair that we try to keep you up to speed. Getting off to a hasty start, the city started by seeking requests for qualifications from various firms who may be interested in taking on this project. Last week on Tuesday, the city apparently scheduled a meeting to review the entries they had received thus far, to which the FOP team was not invited. That meeting was canceled at the last minute with the thought of rescheduling to allow the FOP team to participate. However, once we were told about that change, the invitation was then withdrawn on the same day, and the original meeting went forward at the direction of the mayor without us. This week, the city has continued with that theme, holding at least 3 other meetings, interviewing prospective firms, and once again, our team has not been included or advised. Obviously, with such a major change, our members are interested in this process. We'd like to be kept in the loop. We understand from the lengthy deliberations that we would be able to participate and that our input would be valued, but we're not getting off to a great start. When the purchase was being finalized, it seemed the mayor understood that point, but once again, as soon as the process actually starts, transparency and collaboration have disappeared. What we're hearing now is that the mayor wants the project fast-tracked and well underway before he leaves office. We would counter that haste with the hope that this planning process, as well as the subsequent stages, will get the full attention they deserve and not be rushed, as is a major location change affecting numerous employees from several departments, as well as the neighboring citizens. Rushing to start something just to get it moving, while not including major stakeholders in the process, seems a bit out of step with the direction that you gave in the deliberations to make the purchase itself. Hopefully you are being kept up to speed behind the scenes and your questions answered by the administration. Somehow, though, I doubt that it is. I'd bet that you, like us, were not told about the meetings that have been going on. Please keep focused in your interest in the project for which your group approved the funding. Ask the administration to let you observe or join in. Ask them for direct updates on the progress of the project. Remind them of their alleged commitment to keep our membership involved as well. A multi-million-dollar public safety project that will hopefully serve our community for decades to come deserves nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Post. Deputy Attorney Kulak, who do we have?
We have Chuck Livingston.
Welcome. If you would, please confirm your name for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Well, it's Chuck Livingston. I'm a resident of Elm Heights. I submitted a couple photographs that I'd like to have displayed. So now on display, it can't be seen on Zoom. Thank you. This is my daily walk down 2nd Street for the last couple of weeks. The photograph on the left is the more typical scene. Those scooters are leaving about under 36 inches. So there are clear violations of the ordinance that calls for 54 inches. They violate other city requirements. There are also clear violations of ADA standards. The photograph on the right occurs less frequently, but that's what Bloomington has been like for 4 years, and the conversations continue. Mr. Wason mentioned that they found during their study 605 violations. In the fall, I showed the council photographs of 30 scooters in violation that I took in a 1-hour walk from Elm Heights to downtown and back home again. If I could find 30 violations while on foot in 1 hour, how is it that in, a couple months, they found 600? The numbers are just not consistent. You can ask Mr. Wason, does he count? Were they counting the ones on the left? Are those considered by them reasonably parked? When they find scooters such as the ones illustrated on the right, what do they do with them? There is no place on the sidewalk in the neighborhood that's wide enough to accommodate scooters and maintain the ADA requirements and the city's own requirements. So for now, the situation is that if someone in a wheelchair, someone who's visually impaired, comes upon this, the recommendation from the city is that they file a U report, and within 2 hours, their path will be cleared. And I guess it'll remain that way for another 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I don't see any further requests to comment here in chambers. Do we have anyone else on Zoom?
Yes, we have a comment from Sam Dove, which I will read into the record. Press release, statewide tornado drill. Monroe County will be participating in the statewide tornado drill. The outdoor warning sirens around the county will sound at 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday, March 14th. The Emergency Management Office encourages residents, businesses, and schools to take this drill as an opportunity to practice their action plan in response to a severe weather threat. In the event of severe weather on Tuesday, March 14th, the statewide drill will take place on Wednesday, March 15th at 10:15 a.m. That is Sam Dove's comments. We additionally have one more hand raised, Eric Ost.
Welcome. If you would, please confirm your name for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name's Eric Ost, and I want to follow on what Mr. Livingston said in regards to e-scooters. I must say I'm perplexed. The contract that we had have, or had, I guess, with the scooter companies indicates that specific data should be provided to the city. That data would answer many of the questions that were asked tonight. So I'm befuddled as to why that information is not available. I guess it will be forthcoming. I would also say that 600 some odd violations, I think at the normal parking violation fee would cover the expenditure for this pilot program, possibly. Maybe not quite. I'm not sure why we're not fining the scooter companies for these violations. I have read that the code forbids the city from doing that. And I was hoping that maybe somebody on the council would ask, probably to be answered, that this will be forthcoming, but this is a significant question. Why does the current code not allow enforcement when that enforcement was promised? It was integral, I think, to the approval of the ordinance. And maybe I'll have more to say later. I would also, I guess, ask, are members of the community involved in this city study group in regards to scooters? And if not, I would suggest that maybe members of the community should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ost. Deputy Attorney Kulak, any additional requests on Zoom?
Not that I see, no.
And any here in chambers? Okay. Seeing none, that'll conclude our first period of public comment. Let's move into appointments to boards and commissions. On this particular point, we've spoken for the last several months about CBCI, the City of Bloomington Capital Improvements, the new 501c3 created to manage different projects related to the city, like Hopewell and so forth. And we had Deputy Mayor Mary Catherine Carmichael with us last week to answer questions. We've heard from the mayor. We will hear from him again on March 29th. But we still have our opportunity to appoint a member to that board. So I would like to recommend the appointment of Dora Sims, and she is very well known to all of us, former director of HAND, longtime city employee. I would like to recommend her appointment to the CBCI, board. And I would like to invite council to affirm that or comment. So let's start with Councilmember Volan.
Yeah, Ms. Sims is a fine person to represent the council seat, but I'm a little curious about the text of our memo, which says the first meeting of the newly formed CBCI was held last Friday, where 4 directors were appointed by Jeff Underwood as incorporator of the corporation. The board then adopted bylaws and selected officers. The bylaws adopted by the board provide that 1 director shall be appointed by the council president. They didn't even wait for us to name somebody before they created bylaws. They selected officers without even the courtesy of us having made our appointment. I mean, do we even have a meaningful representative on the board if the very important initial step they take to create bylaws and select officers was done without even waiting for our appointee to be consulted? I mean, I find this to be disturbing, and I question. I was supportive of a 501c3. I was definitely not supportive of it under these conditions, and I still believe that we should have at least a second. I know that Councilmember Sims has said the same thing, that we should have at least a second person, but I mean, should we really be giving our imprimatur to this kind of activity? That's my question. It's a rhetorical one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims, and then Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree about rhetorical, and I agree with Councilmember Volan's statements, and particularly having the 1 council appointment. Yeah. I think right from the beginning, I've always said 3 and 2 would be a much better split. But what I would like to add this evening is, in reading through the bylaws, one of the things that disturbing, if I could use that word, is that if one of the members on the board were to leave or that position become vacant, and let's say, for example, it's our appointee, then that board replaces that person. It don't come back to us, if I understand this correctly. So we don't have an opportunity to appoint someone else to replace our own appointee, and that seems a little off to me, if I'm reading it correctly. So that's my comments on that.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Sandberg.
Did you call on Councilmember Rollo first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Rollo, then Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. I think, as I understand it, you have the ability to make this appointment as president of the council. Doesn't necessarily require a vote, but I have questions concerning the CBCI. I agree with both council members, Sims and Councilmember Volin. The group has already been formed by the mayor, is meeting. I have the greatest respect for Ms. Sims. I think she's extremely capable for a role such as this. But I still have questions regarding what and the type of projects funded by this group. Would it diminish the role of the council? I have questions that I've issued to our council attorney regarding its funding, the scope of its duties, possible property transfers, whether it enters contracts, and whether this might represent a step toward privatization of city services. So I have a lot of trepidation for making an appointment to this CBCI, as it may be interpreted as giving my consent, as Councilmember Volin said. Just to quote Mr. Post, rushing to get things moving without the participation of the stakeholders seems to be the operational, the modus operandi of the administration, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg.
As Mr. Post pointed out in his public comments this evening, I think this entire process lacks the transparency and the public debate that something of this importance absolutely requires. I don't recall casting a vote or having a public discussion as to even the merits of a 501c3, which is basically privatization in a nonprofit private corporation, a board, to take over decision-making about city assets. Now, the city assets in question here are two different types. We've got Hopewell and we've got trades. This is about developing properties for how these two very prime pieces of property are going to build out, are going to be constructed. The two venues that I have the most concern about with the makeup of this board and their expertise are arts venues. And it's my understanding that the stakeholders that are currently managing, at least certainly the Waldron, have not even been involved in a discussion about what this means for them, who already hold a contract to manage the performance spaces and the gallery spaces in the Waldron. To me, this is a gross violation of the public's trust. And so, as many of my colleagues have indicated, I have the utmost confidence in Dora Sims to be able to be a member of any board. She's a tremendous resource and has been and will continue to be. But I can't agree to this because I have not had any decision-making about this formation. And it's clear to me, this has been in the works for a long time. They already have their bylaws. They've already had their first meeting. 4 members have already been appointed. And I, again, think this is a violation of the public trust. And I, as a council person, am going to be forced to abstain on any vote on our representative because I have major issues with the whole ordeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I agree that the process has not been as transparent and inclusive as it should have been, but I'm also a bit puzzled because last week we had Deputy Mayor Mary Catherine Carmichael here to answer questions about the CBCI, and these issues were not raised at that point. And certainly we have been notified, 6 weeks ago about the formation of this body, so if there were serious concerns among my colleagues, then I don't understand why they were not raised earlier. That said, I think Doris Sims would be an excellent appointee for this, given her experience with HAND and also as a board member of the IU Credit Union. So I would support the appointment. I don't think there needs to be a vote necessarily, so we'll just see what happens. These concerns should well be raised with the mayor and with, maybe attending the next board meeting. Bylaws can be revised. I just checked the bylaws regarding what Councilmember Sims said about filling vacancies. And it is true that they say a vacancy of an unexpired term due to resignation or, somebody moving away or something, can be filled by the other 4 board members. So I also did not catch that, but it's not as egregious as I initially thought when Councilmember Sims said it. At least, subsequent terms after the initial term of 1 or 2 years will be appointed by this body or the president of this body. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Volin and Councilmember.
Point of information. I was ill last Wednesday and not able to attend and not even really feeling well enough to even watch it. And even if I had been here to express my concerns, it looks to me like this is a fait accompli. This has been decided long before any of us even had the opportunity to ask questions about how is this going to be funded? What does this mean in terms of the public transparency and how these venues, particularly our arts venues, which are the anchors for the downtown arts, the Waldron and the Buskirk Chumley, are going to be managed? And does that take it out of the hands of any council oversight or any even city administration oversight? So my apologies for not being here last week, but I don't think it would have mattered.
Thank you. Councilmember Volin.
Well, I wanted to comment on my colleagues on the other side of the dais because they both made very good points. I don't quite agree with Councilmember Sandberg that this is privatization, but other than that, I generally accept her sentiment. In the past, before this body existed, the mayor could unilaterally make decisions such as to convey the second fire station to the Lotus World Music and Arts Festival, as Mayor Kruzan did in 2015. So there is a slight decentralizing of decision-making with the creation of this body. Having said that, I think it was very reasonable to assume that there would be, let's call it more collaboration, but I would frankly call it more democratic management of these assets, that the idea behind the CBC, I think that council was and has been accustomed to accepting a minority role in most boards and commissions, that we've named one person less than the mayor. But this is more than one person less. This is 2 people less. This is 20% of the board instead of 40, when they could easily have given us a second seat. And what Councilmember Sims just noted about the fact that they can replace an unexpired council-appointed term. That's ridiculous. Why shouldn't we be able to why do they need to replace our appointee? How hard is that for us? We go through it all the time. We have slacked in the past on appointing the occasional seat here and there, but it's just absurd. I find no reason whatsoever why we can't A, have 2 seats, and B, that we can't be the ones to replace our own appointees, even midway through a term. We do it all the time with other boards and commissions. What I see instead is, I do believe that Councilmember Sandberg is right about it being a fait accompli, that this is, the administration simply decides and we're going to like it or not. And it's up to us as a council to decide what actions we must take out of our normal comfort zone to call the administration onto the carpet and say, you can't keep doing this. The same is true for Hopewell. Hopewell was designed without any input, meaningful input from the council. They claimed that their plan required no approval from us. Okay, well, maybe we think it should be approved by us like we approved every other plan in town. I'm not sure about the legality of it, and I'd like to have our staff look into it. But the bottom line is, if we don't like that, we have to ask, what are we willing to do about it? And that means withholding assent on other crucial issues coming before us that the administration needs to get done until they behave themselves. So, I did not bargain for this kind of 501c3. I spoke praisingly of it. I thought it was a good idea. I do think it's better than having the mayor making unilateral decisions on buildings like that, but it's only incrementally better. It's not, it's in no way a collaboration with the legislative body, and I'm over it. So, my belief here, notwithstanding the praise our potential nominee has, is to not assent by naming somebody until we get better answers, until we negotiate a better administrative arrangement, because I find this unacceptable. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Just a little bit of homework. Thank you. Just a little bit of homework. Now, I understand that there is no vote required, but I want to go on record, and I think many of us have said this, that I do support my president's appointment of Doris Sims to this board. And we'll discuss later on our feelings on the CBCI. Did I get that right? There are some things that concern me that I've mentioned, but like Councilmember Boland, and I have not changed that. I supported it when we first talked about it, and I still do. Just maybe not as certainly and strongly as I did at the beginning. So I wanted to see this move forward, and I just want to make those comments as part of the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I'll just go on record. Yeah, I support Doris Sims being appointed to the board by the president. She's a great representative of our community. But I am disturbed about the ramming things forward with this, as well as Showers building. So, but Ms. Sims is fantastic, so I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. First, just wanted to share my sentiments, like the rest of my colleagues, that I very much would support the appointment of Doris Sims to the council appointed position on the CBCI. Also, will note that I share a lot of the concerns raised by my colleagues. I don't feel a need necessarily to withhold appointment at this time over those concerns, but I think there are a variety of ways in which the council could work in the coming weeks and months to ensure a more collaborative process, more transparent process that we are comfortable with respect to how the CBCI operates. And I'm happy to engage with my colleagues and the administration on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay. Councilmember Volan.
Last thing I'll say is I respect the idea of making the appointment now, but with all due respect to the quality of the appointee, if we leave it unappointed, that keeps it on the burner in a way that it wouldn't if we don't make the appointment now and instead request a restructuring of the CBI. Now, we can do both. We can do either, I should say. I think, though, that by making the appointment now, we simply accept the terms given to us, and that makes it harder to change. So, you know, I'm not unsupportive of the eventual candidate. I have a problem with naming it when when most of us have acknowledged that the terms are problematic. And I would sort of wish that we would, I mean, if we are going to make the appointment tonight, I would like to have a better idea. I mean, I'm encouraged by Councilmember Flaherty's statement as well, that he, for one, is willing to look into it more. But I mean, we have to take proactive action to make this better, because the administration is clearly not going to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith and Councilmember Sims.
Yeah, just some information. So I did attend the first meeting of the CBCI last Friday. They did not schedule a second meeting. They decided to wait and consult with the new member that they thought was going to be appointed soon. The bylaws do have, of course, a section on amending the bylaws, and it says these bylaws may be altered, amended, or appealed, and new bylaws may be adopted by a majority of the directors present at any regular meeting, provided that at least 15 days written notice is given to the directors, the common council, the mayor of the city, and the public. So I feel like an amendment to the bylaws should be made, at least for the purpose of allowing the appointing entity, in this case the common council, to fill any vacancy that should occur before the fulfillment of a whole term. So I don't know, I feel like maybe having our appointee on the board would allow her to vote on a bylaws change. So in that respect, it would be good. Also, just to note that the appointments are staggered. Some of the mayors are 1 year and some are 2 year, but this council appointment is for a 2-year term.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. We all have different thoughts, and the last thing I will say about this is that, and I hope many of you saw this, David Henry, the chair of the Monroe County Democratic Party, as he want to do during the month of February, was to make Black history parts of his weekly speech or their newsletter. And if many of you saw this, he recognized not my wife and I as an entity of providing community service to this city, totaling over 70 years. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that my wife, and I think the qualification is not an issue, but she has certain expertise, in particular with housing and Hopewell and these other things. She'll work well with the other folks that are on the board already. Most importantly, she wants to do this service. So anything that we might discuss or lead to that could cause her to be a pawn in this deal will not happen this evening, at least from my standpoint. So thank you very much. And we don't need a vote for your appointee, if I'm correct. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay. Thank you for this very good discussion. I think it's important. I think it is important for administration to hear as well. Thank you too for the what I heard to be the universal or near universal support for Ms. Sims and her appointment and the skill and expertise she would bring. It seems to me at this point we have a couple options. We have the opportunity, well, let me back up a minute. As it's written in the bylaws for the nonprofit, the appointment can either come directly from the president of council or by resolution of council. I would like to at least have the affirmation of council and your support for any nomination that I make. Okay. That said, we can proceed with that nomination now, have her represented in the conversations going forward for whenever the next meeting is scheduled, or since Mayor Hamilton is scheduled to be with us on March 29th to field questions and to field discussion, we can postpone an appointment until after we have had a chance to speak with Mayor Hamilton. Does council have a preference? Councilmember Sandberg?
I would prefer to postpone until we get more information and it gets put publicly on the record from all of our good questions.
Thank you. Additional opinions? Councilmember Sims?
Is it possible for us to do a voice vote that is in support of your appointee? And again, my concern is if postponing and all these other things, I stated earlier my feelings on this. Okay, this has nothing to do with the appointee. This has everything to do with some of our whatever we've got with the administration. I'm fine with that. We don't need a vote. The president can do it. So either we affirm that appointee or we do not to this evening. We don't need a vote. And then there's still going to be time to discuss the other aspects. which we will. Oh, yeah. To me, they're kind of separate, so.
Okay. Councilmember Volin.
That's interesting. I'm still processing what Councilmember Sims said, but I mean, it's important to note that Ms. Sims doesn't represent herself there. She's a council representative. She represents the council's interest. And so, you know, one thing that we're saying tonight, independent of Ms. Sims, is that the council has a greater interest than has been allotted to us by the administration, and that we believe that we should have more say in it. I think that the fact that the CBCI has not yet stated their next meeting date because they're awaiting this appointment is slightly encouraging. You know, I would hope they would not meet until we appointed somebody. If they're not going to meet before March 29th, then maybe we don't have to make the appointment right away since they don't have a new meeting set. And that we can have that conversation with the mayor since he's going to be scheduled to be here on the 29th anyway. But having said that, I'm not going to object to making the appointment tonight. I'm ambivalent about it. I think people have heard my concerns. Frankly, I think the thing that would help would be if leadership were to say that this is going to be on the agenda in the immediate near future so that we can in fact talk about it, because I think it is of immediate concern to the majority of the body.
And when you say that, you mean the appointment, or do you mean the nature of the 501c3 itself?
The latter. The
Okay.
appointment is not the issue.
Right.
The person in question is not the question. It's the body itself.
Got
I
it.
mean, we have been expressing concerns about transparency. We heard a concern tonight about the new police headquarters not being transparent. This was not transparent. And I brought up Hopewell. That plan was not done. I mean, if transparency includes the council, it was not transparent because the council was not included in consultation for any of these particular actions by the administration. I think it's time that the administration was more transparent with the council. So anything that leadership can do to bring these questions to a head, I think it's time that we do it. So having said that, I think it's up to you all to decide what to do.
Thank you. Additional comments? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
If I understand correctly, you're looking for feedback on whether to proceed with an appointment tonight or wait? Is that accurate?
Until the 29th, when we hear from Mayor Hamilton.
I guess I would prefer to proceed with an appointment because we have no guarantees as to when the next meeting will be. I mean, they said they would wait for the appointee, but maybe they won't. We don't know. And we know that the mayor is eager to activate this board. And I also feel like our concerns about the lack of transparency with the process and the possible makeup of the board being only one council representative, I think those do not have to do with our appointment. We need to, as colleagues have said, we need to be proactive. I mean, we need to contact the other members of the board and the mayor's office and maybe attend the meeting when it comes and let our views be known. But I would recommend going ahead with the appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg.
Where is it written that this board has to be a 5-member board? Because what I'm hearing is that we as council need better representation on it. I would like to see better representation from people with expertise in the arts. So is it possible when we're talking to the administration that we recommend there actually be 3 appointments by this body? That would include Doris Sims, who we're all in agreement is perfectly capable. But I would like to see 2 more individuals on this board that have a demonstrated commitment to the arts in Bloomington. And while there are people that have already been appointed by the mayor who peripherally have been involved with the Waldron Study Group, I think it needs to have more expertise in that particular area because these are extremely valuable venues in the city's downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Volin.
I want to endorse Councilmember Sandberg's idea because that allows us to make the appointment tonight while still saying we insist on more seats. I'm a little concerned about whether 7 members might be slightly less wieldy than 5, but I think 5 was an arbitrary number. And more importantly, like this is a request, or it could be a demand of ours if we want, that allows us to ensure that the council at least has the beginning of representation, even if it's inadequate. So, I mean, I still, it's not my preference. Like, I believe that we should take a stronger stand and not appoint somebody until we resolve the issue. I'm hopeful also that the new board won't meet before March 29th, but perhaps they will. I disagree with Councilmember Piedmont Smith in the idea that somehow we should attend those meetings. Maybe perhaps at the beginning we should attend 1 or 2 to get the feel of it. But kind of the point of this is, I mean, I was a little surprised that we didn't appoint one of our own to be the representative on that body, a member of the council. But I also know how busy we all are. And independent of current electoral activities, we're generally very busy. And there's a reason we appoint people to be representatives. We can't do everything ourselves, and we shouldn't be trying. So I include in that even having to attend meetings of the CBCI just to get our point across. Maybe we'll do it now because we're so insistent on more representation for us, but ultimately, you know, I think we need to appoint citizens to represent the council's interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Let's proceed with the vote. For affirmation, that's my preference. I think we should do it.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional comment? Okay. I continue to hear the 2 issues with general support for Ms. Sims and the skills and expertise she would bring, and I hear a lot of concerns that my senses can only be addressed directly with the mayor when he is with us on March 24th. It seems to me the question then becomes, do we want any representation on that board between now and then? And if that is the case, I think we've identified an individual that we all feel very strongly about and are very supportive of. So I would like to suggest, dare I, that we proceed with a vote in terms of support for this particular appointment, and then take up these other issues in terms of the number of board members, the process for reappointing, and all the issues that we've summarized tonight. We bring them up with the mayor on March 29th. Would that be acceptable? Are there any objections? Okay. With that, then, we have the recommendation for Ms. Dora Sims to be a council appointee to the CBCI, the City of Bloomington Capital Improvements Board. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? Pardon me? I would like one.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Abstain.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Scambalori.
Yes.
Rallo.
Abstain.
Sims.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
And Flaherty.
Yes.
That passes 6-0-2. Thank you all very much. We have no legislation for second readings or resolutions. We have no legislation for first readings this evening, so that brings us to our second of 2 periods of additional public comment. If there is anyone in chambers, please indicate that would like to offer comment. Please indicate by raising your hand. Ms. Kulak, could you please extend our invitation on Zoom?
Yes, for folks who are on Zoom who would like to make a comment, please raise your hand using the Reactions tab or the More tab. If you're having trouble finding either of those, you can send a message to the meeting host.
I'm not seeing any raised hands here in chambers. Deputy Attorney Kulak, anyone on Zoom?
Not that I see currently.
Okay, we'll give it just another moment. Anyone?
No.
Okay. Would you, yes, if you'd like to offer public comment, please approach the podium. And if you would, please sign in. It is now twice that I've remembered to remind people of that, so I'm sure the clerk will be glad. So if you would, when you're ready, please state your name for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Can you pull the mic a little bit closer?
Yeah. Everybody hear me okay?
Better, thank you.
All right. Counselors, committee members, and members of the assembled. My name is Abe Shapiro. I'm a citizen of Bloomington here. And just wanted to advise everybody that this month is Disability Month morning. And also just wanted to provide a little eulogy. This week, the Disability Rights Committee is mourning the loss of one of its most fervent supporters and founders, Judy Heumann, who passed away last Sunday at the age of 75. She was really influential in breaking down the barriers associated with disability. In 1970, the New York Board of Education refused to grant her a teaching license on the grounds that she was a fire hazard. Ultimately, the case was settled out of court, and she became the first wheelchair-bound teacher in the state. In 1973, she held a demonstration in the streets of New York City, particularly on Madison Avenue, to ensure President Nixon signed Section 504 into law. And in 1977, most famously, Heumann led over 150 activists inside the San Francisco office of the federal department meant to craft Section 504 regulations and occupied the building for 25 days, after which the regulations were signed. So the reason I say this here tonight is because last week, as the founder of the Neurodiversity Coalition at Indiana University, I had a chance to hold a Disability Day of Mourning vigil and just to kick off this month of mourning. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the council, bring that to the attention of the citizens on Bloomington. It's a Zoom network as well as the city of Bloomington in general. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Deputy Attorney Kulak, anyone on Zoom?
There are no hands raised that I see at this time.
Okay. And I see no further comment here in chambers, so that concludes our second period of public comment for this meeting. And let's take up matters of council schedule.
I believe what's on the schedule next is just the next regular session on March 29th, 2023.
What will we do without each other for 3 weeks? Oh, good heavens. So thank you very much. So anything else for the good of the order? And if there are no objections, then we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Have a good spring break.